Ancient Egypt is one of the most fascinating and influential civilizations in history. Their pyramids, temples, and tombs still awe and inspire us today. Their culture, religion, and art have shaped our imagination and understanding of the ancient world. Their achievements in science, mathematics, and medicine have left a lasting legacy for humanity. But behind the glory and glamour of ancient Egypt, there were also dark and dirty secrets that reveal a different side of their society. Secrets that expose the harsh realities, the brutal practices, and the bizarre beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. Secrets that may shock, disgust, or amuse you. In this video, we will explore some of the most disturbing facts about ancient Egypt and how they reflect the complexity and diversity of their civilization. One of the most disturbing facts about ancient Egypt is that they used to eat mummies as a medicine. Yes, you heard that right. Mummies, the preserved bodies of the dead, were not only revered and respected, but also consumed and digested. How did this happen? And why did they do it? The practice of eating mummies dates back to the Middle Ages, when Europeans became fascinated by the exotic and mysterious culture of ancient Egypt. They believed that mummies had magical and medicinal properties, and that they could cure various ailments, such as epilepsy, headaches, or wounds. They also believed that mummies were made of a special substance called mumia, which was a black tar-like resin that was used to embalm the bodies. However, the Europeans were mistaken. Mumia was not a natural substance, but a mixture of oils, spices, and resins that the ancient Egyptians applied to the bodies after removing the internal organs. The actual mummies were mostly made of dried flesh, bones, and bandages. But this did not stop the Europeans from importing, selling, and eating mummies as a medicine. Mummies were ground into powder, mixed with liquids, or made into pills, and taken orally or applied topically. They were also used as an ingredient in paints, cosmetics, and perfumes. The demand for mummies was so high that the supply soon ran out. To meet the demand, some unscrupulous traders resorted to making fake mummies using the bodies of criminals, slaves, or animals. They also raided the tombs of ancient Egypt and looted the mummies of the pharaohs and the nobles. The practice of eating mummies continued until the 16th century, when some doctors and scholars began to question its efficacy and morality. They argued that mummies were not a medicine, but a corpse, and that eating them was not only useless, but also disgusting and sacrilegious. They also pointed out the health risks of eating mummies, such as infections, poisoning, or diseases. Eventually, the practice of eating mummies was banned and abandoned, but not before it caused irreparable damage to the cultural heritage of ancient Egypt. Another disturbing fact about ancient Egypt is that they used to kill their servants and bury them with their masters. This was not a rare or isolated incident, but a common and accepted practice, especially in the early dynasties of ancient Egypt. How did this happen? And why did they do it? The practice of killing servants and burying them with their masters was part of the ancient Egyptian belief in the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end, but the beginning of a new journey. They believed that the soul of the deceased would travel to the underworld, where it would face a series of trials and judgments before reaching the paradise of the field of reeds. They also believed that the soul of the deceased would need the same things that it needed in life, such as food, drink, clothing, and companionship. To ensure the well-being and happiness of the deceased in the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians performed elaborate rituals and ceremonies, such as mummification, funerary offerings, and tomb construction. They also provided the deceased with various objects and items such as jewelry, weapons, tools, and furniture that they could use in the afterlife. And they also provided the deceased with human and animal servants that they could command and enjoy in the afterlife. The human and animal servants that were sacrificed and buried with the deceased were called retainer sacrifices. They were usually chosen from the household or the court of the deceased, and they were considered privileged and honored to serve their master in the afterlife. They were killed by strangulation, stabbing, or poisoning, and then mummified and placed in the tomb of the deceased. Sometimes they were also depicted in paintings or statues that represented their roles and functions in the afterlife. The practice of retainer sacrifice was most prevalent in the first and second dynasties of ancient Egypt, when the pharaohs and the elites were buried in large and elaborate tombs surrounded by hundreds of human and animal servants. However, the practice declined and disappeared in the later dynasties when the ancient Egyptians developed a more individualistic and democratic view of the afterlife. They also replaced the human and animal servants with figurines or models, called shabtis, that were believed to come to life and serve the deceased in the afterlife. A third disturbing fact about ancient Egypt is that they used to make birth control from crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Crocodile dung, the feces of the large and fearsome reptiles that inhabited the Nile River, was not only a nuisance and a danger, but also a contraceptive and an abortifacient. How did this happen, and why did they do it? The practice of making birth control from crocodile dung dates back to the ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the Ebers Papyrus and the Kahun Papyrus, that contain various recipes and remedies for various ailments, including fertility and pregnancy. One of the recipes for preventing conception was to mix crocodile dung with honey or sour milk and insert it into the vagina before intercourse. Another recipe for inducing abortion was to mix crocodile dung with oil or water and inject it into the uterus after intercourse. The ancient Egyptians believed that crocodile dung had magical and medicinal properties and that it could act as a barrier, a spermicide, or a uterine irritant. They also believed that crocodile dung was alkaline and that it could neutralize the acidity of the vagina and create a hostile environment for the sperm. However, the ancient Egyptians were mistaken. Crocodile dung was not alkaline but acidic, and it could actually increase the acidity of the vagina and create a favorable environment for the sperm. It could also cause infections, inflammations, or complications that could endanger the health and life of the woman. The practice of making birth control from crocodile dung was not the only or the most effective method of contraception or abortion in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians also used other methods such as coitus interruptus, lactational amenorrhea, or herbal preparations that were safer and more reliable. However, the practice of making birth control from crocodile dung was one of the most bizarre and disgusting methods of family planning in history. These are some of the most disturbing facts about ancient Egypt and how they reveal a different side of their society. They show that ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of beauty and wisdom, but also of horror and madness. They show that ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of life and death, but also of life after death. And they show that ancient Egypt was not only a civilization of the past, but also of the present and the future. What do you think? How do you feel about these facts? What do they mean to you? How do they affect your perception of ancient Egypt? Share your thoughts and opinions with me. I'm curious to hear what you have to say.